My name is Suzanne. I'm co-founder and head of carer support here at Mobilise. I'm also a carer for my husband, Matt, who has young onset Parkinson's, and we have some other care situations in the family. That multi-generational caring is what's going on here as well. Welcome to everyone that's joined. Mobilise are a community of people. We're helping each other as we look after someone. And together we've created some really amazing resources, blogs and guides, simple digital tools, and above all, a friendly, supportive space for us to all be together. We're empowering those that care to thrive. And this is Mobilise Lives. Our topic today is around emergency planning, and we're going to get it done. That's why I want a pen and paper. We're going to get a really super simple emergency plan done so that you can take off some of the pressure, some of the worries. You're going to have a sense of achievement, and you're going to start to feel like things are moving forwards. And hopefully by the end of this event, you'll know what the plan is. You'll know why we might need one. Maybe have a think about who can help. A first draft of your plan, pen and paper at the ready, or your notes app open. A little bit of peace of mind. Hopefully you've dialed down the emotions around the topic. We recognise that's a big thing. And dialed up your confidence in your plan. And I hope, we're going to have a fun time, and you're going to leave feeling inspired and uplifted, not by me, but by the amazing conversations in the chat as well. Now, we're recording the session, so if you're watching the recording, you can pause it as you go along if you want to, if I'm going too fast for you. Now, the reason why it's just me today and no guests, I've been chatting to a number of carers in our community about emergency planning, and I was thinking, oh, maybe they'll come on and talk about the topic. But you know what? The more we talked about the topic, the more it unearthed. The more we kind of got this sense of, this isn't just an admin task. This isn't just getting round to writing stuff down. It's become quite a big decision-making, emotional, future-proofing, thinking about the future kind of thing. And that's pretty tough, yeah? So there's all of this stuff going on while we're trying to create an emergency plan. And that's difficult to talk about because it means we need to talk about the person we care for. And I completely get that that's not what everybody wants to do live on screen and be recorded. So thank you to those that have had the conversations with me, which has really helped me to inform what might work today, and how we can hopefully overcome some of those barriers. But I think it's really important for everyone to know there are those kind of barriers. People are having those difficulties. So if you're thinking it was just you, it's not just you, okay? Lots of people have got different problems when it comes to creating their emergency plan. You are not alone with this, okay? So we're going to work through today. We're going to work out how we can put some of those things to one side in order to make progress. And then we'll come back at the end with a bit of Q&A to see, well, what can we do about some of these things? And we'll try and tackle some of those things as well. But quite often they're in the way, so we need to put them to one side. So first of all, before we really dive into it, let's just talk about what an emergency plan is. And it's basically having something down on a piece of paper or an online in an online space that explains what needs to happen if you're not around. And the you're not around bit is quite often the sort of big scary thing that we think about. And actually what we've discovered, it's probably easier to dial that down already, to dial it down to what if you had a planned hospital admission? Like you knew you were going in a couple of days and you just had 15 minutes to write something down. What would you write down? What would be the most important things to get down? So sometimes dialing that down to that kind of level is much easier than thinking about, I don't know, an alien's going to abduct you. You're going to get knocked over by a bus. All those sort of scary things you're going to get, and it used to be in COVID times, you're going to get, what if you get COVID? All those scary things, kind of, we're already in this fear state when we're creating an emergency plan. So just dial it down to what if you had to go into hospital for a day thing? What would you need someone to do? So sometimes that kind of just taking it down a step helps as well. And thinking about who would be stepping in, thinking about what they would need to know. And this is going to be a little bit different for everybody. And I'll tell you, kind of just thinking through different scenarios. So in my household, so my husband, those needs have changed, but there was a time when I would definitely have needed someone to come in and to look after him and the children. And there was quite a lot I felt I needed to write down. But Matt can communicate. His speech isn't great, but he can communicate. So he can explain what he needs. He can say that he needs a drink, and he had a certain amount of capability. So you're working from that point of view. What's the reality in your household, or this person's household? Working from that starting point rather than thinking you've got to write everything down, okay? So, and I love, yeah, all the things that are coming up in the chat yet, and all those things. And yeah, the person we care for, telling them that there's an emergency plan for them, woo, that might feel a bit big, mightn't it? That might be a bit of an odd thing to explain to somebody because they may not fully realise just how much you do for them. And that's the other thing we're doing an emergency plan. By starting to write things down, we start to realise just how much we've taken on and how much we're doing, which might make you feel like, go me, look how essential I am in life. And that might give you a real sense of purpose, or it may make you feel quite burdened with all of that. So all of that stuff is going on. Okay. And I think quite often the biggest barrier is who will take over. And we're going to sort of look at some different scenarios later on when we do some Q&As, but that's quite often one of the biggest barriers to sort of getting it done. Now, I'm going to ask you to do something that might feel a bit ridiculous, okay, as we go into the next thing. It might feel unhelpful, but I want you to trust me, because the bunch of carers that I spent chatting to this through, we tackled it the other way round, and we got really stuck in the emotional stuff and all of those sorts of things, and the who would take over, rather than actually focusing on getting something down on a piece of paper. So what I'm going to ask you to do is to put all of those feelings, emotions, barriers, and problems to one side. And I don't know how you do that in your head. It might be put it in a pot. You might be asking it to step outside. You might be telling it to take a break, flushing it away, hanging it on a hook or something like that. But all those worries, all those barriers, just pretend they don't exist. And excellent. Yeah, Claire's putting hers outside the back door. Fabulous. Just gonna lock that door, make sure it's firmly closed. Just put them aside for 1 minute. And the next thing we're going to do is something more helpful. It's going to think about, is the word emergency plan a really helpful word for us to be using as we're starting to put this document together, as we're starting to write stuff down? Or is that in itself creating a little bit of a, ugh? So you choose. So here we're thinking, what would it be most helpful to you to call your emergency plan? By all means, you can use emergency plan, but you might want to use one of the others. So what if plan, sometimes like that. A handover plan, and that might be a more appropriate thing to talk to the person you care about in terms of a handover. A backup plan, so just like, oh, stuff happens, I've got a backup plan, that's always good. Plan B, that might be another one. A just in case plan, a contingency plan, or something else. Now, professionals, if you're dealing with social services, dealing with the GPs and NHS, emergency plan might be more the word that they would use. But just like the word carer, we don't always like either. We don't always have to use their language when we're doing things for ourselves. Okay, and particularly if we're involving family and things like that. Okay, fabulous, lovely. That's our first little step. Well, first 2 steps was putting away all the barriers and the difficult thoughts. And the next step was just renaming it, bit of a rebrand, as it were, to see how that would be for us. Excellent, lovely, fabulous, fabulous. Now, pen and paper are now required. We are going to actually do this. Let me share my screen. So emergency plan sorted. Yes, we're going to do it right now. Pen and paper at the ready. Let's see what progress we can make together. I'm going to run through where we're going, and then we'll go through each one step by step. So first of all, we're going to just capture who the handover plan is for, their name, date of birth, NHS number, address, telephone numbers. Okay, but just so you can see where we're going, we'll come back to this slide, don't panic. We're then going to capture what's the most important thing to know. So a lot of emergency planning templates have loads of boxes to fill out, and you may feel that it's not done until you've filled them all out. And actually, I think if someone was coming in to step in, they're probably not going to read more than 2 bits of paper anyway. So giving them the most important stuff that really matters up front. So things like, how long can they be left alone for? It's really key. You know, some people would survive for a few hours and be absolutely fine. Other people need someone there straight away. So that's quite, you know, it gives that sense of how urgent it is. Who has a key? How are they going to get in? Don't panic if you don't know the answer to that question. That might be a challenge to go on and sort out. There will always be ways to get in if need be, and not so relevant in some cases because the person you care for may be perfectly capable of answering the door. Okay, so don't get too hung up on these things. What can they do for themselves? So actually, you know, what don't we need to worry about? Or what would be the ideal plan for the first 24 hours? Maybe that might be what you want to cover. Or anything else important to know. These are all suggestions. You won't need to have all of these for everybody, but these are the kind of things you might want to put up front. What else is important to know? Like if medication is vital and you haven't got all the details of the medication on the front page, you might want to just have, please see their medication regime. That's really important. So if you're caring for someone who has medication timing is really important, that can be really important to know. And it might be that, you know, for example, they cannot self-manage their medication and you absolutely need to monitor that and take responsibility for it. Or maybe something like the dog's not good with strangers. The person you care for needs help with toileting, or make sure they have a drink. So that most important to know. That might come from some of these other sections that I'm about to have a look at. So what have we got? Some helpful contacts, the GP name, GP phone number, contact details of others who can help. This might feel quite blank right now. We'll come back to what if that's blank. We'll come back to that in the Q&A. Medical things. So sometimes actually quite a lot of emergency plans don't actually include a space to put what the diagnosis is. And sometimes that's really answers a lot of questions and makes a lot of sense. So it may be that that's less relevant and it's more about how the symptoms are and how that affects them. It's more important. So the medical condition or diagnosis, medications, treatment and timings, and any allergies can be the key ones as well. So again, like if someone had something really like a really serious allergy, you might put that right on the front page. Matt has a fish allergy. That doesn't really matter until people come to start to make food. And actually he would be able to explain that as well and would not pick up and eat a tuna sandwich if it was made for him. But you know the person you care for best as to how much they can manage and how much needs to be written down. And then things like these might be extra sections. And again, not all of them will be relevant. Daily routine, personal care, emotional and mobility needs. What do they need help with? What does somebody helping them need to do? Dietary requirements, again, very important. And just to have that bigger picture of others in the household and pets, etc. So at times my emergency plan needed to include care for my children. And I had a friend who they could just go around to the house and she would take care of them. Whereas now my children are my backup plan. Hurrah! So things are constantly changing as well. And so that's another of the issue with emergency plans is that we need to keep them up to date. So the more complicated they are, the harder they are to keep up to date. But we'll cover that off in the Q&A as well. Okay, so those are the sections. So let's start back at the beginning now that you know where we're going. On your piece of paper, go on, do it, write it down. Who is this handover plan for? The date of birth, NHS number, address, and telephone numbers. If you don't know the NHS number, just leave it blank. That's something that might be your next step. You're going to come back to that. Some of you have that cleverly recorded in the inside of a notebook or on your phone somewhere and things like that as well. So go ahead, let's make a start and start writing those down. Yeah, and I like suggesting that I hope the plan you hope you never have to use. And that may be the reality. It may never need to be used. And actually, the reality of ours is I keep making a copy of the medication page, and that's what we take when we go to appointments. And the consultant or somebody asks, or somebody new says, "What medicines are you taking?" And I can never remember, and they always get confused if we try and talk them through it and they write it down. So I just hand them the copy. So that's where this little plan can have an added bonus. Which bits could you use somewhere else? Okay.
I think, Suzanne, we've got a question, but it's ended up in the chat section.
Okay. Whose phone numbers? These are kind of like the most important telephone numbers. So if it's an emergency backup plan for you, your phone number is not much use because you're not available for whatever reason. Someone has found you, is helping you or whatever. So it might be the telephone number of the house where the person lives. It might be their mobile phone number. It might be the phone number of social services. It might be the phone number of the person who's going to help you with your backup plan. Okay. Not everyone's phone numbers at this page. You know what's coming on the next page. You've got more helpful contacts, but like those key numbers that they're going to need to start ringing the first time something happens. So in my case, let's imagine something happened to me. I'm in A&E or something, and someone then gets my emergency plan and they phone my husband and says, "Suzanne's with us. She's all right. And we're trying to work through your emergency plan and getting you some help right now." So they can communicate with him. So don't forget that the person you care for may need to be communicated with. So if their number's not there, they won't be communicated with. So yeah, just a few telephone numbers. Now, on the Mobilise template, it gives you a page of like emergency numbers. Like, I know it sounds obvious, but 999, 111, 101, and then you can add your duty social worker and things like that, whatever's relevant to you, but those basic numbers. Now, mobile phone numbers, we're very reliant on that, isn't it? They're all in our phone. Fabulous. What if you've got no battery? It is good to have a few numbers written down on a piece of paper, just in case, or somewhere that other people can access. But we'll talk about where this goes afterwards. We're just focusing on getting it down at the moment. So very easy to get distracted. And I can see already in the chat, lots of thoughts pinging. That's fine if you've already done this sheet. But first do this, and then let's worry about all those extra thoughts. So I'm going to imagine you've done that one. Okay. If not, just leave some blanks, come back to it. Lovely. So then what's most important to know? So thinking about probably just one of the people you care for to start with, if there's more than one person, focus on one, because again, we can make it distracting and impossible to complete if we can start with all our special cases. Focus on one. Is there something about how long can they be left for? Is there an answer to that key question? Some of those questions might not be relevant there. What can they do for themselves? And maybe just a sentence about the ideal plan for the first 24 hours. Does someone need to go to the house and stay with them? Does someone need to pop in and check on them a few times a day? You know, just what's the need there? And that's going to be different for everybody. Does someone need to keep phoning them and make sure they're okay and reassure them? Maybe that's what's going to be most important. Lovely. Okay. So make a note of those things. Maybe there's something different for the person you care for that you're just thinking it's that. You know, you need to speak slowly. That some people may not be okay with strangers, and it may be difficult to manage that. Some people may at first show aggression, and maybe it's a tip on how to manage that aggression. Or if they don't let you in, don't rush them. Excellent. Right. Then a few more helpful contacts. So how many times are you asked for the GP name and telephone number? Now, in theory, yes, the GP address would be helpful, but I'm thinking most people have access if they're going to be helping somebody out, will be able to Google that and find the address. But make sure you've got the right name of your GP practice, because that may have changed. And then contact details of others who can help. Now, this may be blank at the moment. We're just going to pretend like that's absolutely fine, and we'll kind of revisit that at a later stage. Don't let that stop you from having some sort of a plan. Worst case scenario may well be that social services would step in, and if the emergency services were involved in any way, then that's kind of where things would end up if there was no other plan. So it may be helpful to have the number of the local social services and the local duty social worker, that someone on duty that's out of hours. That number will be on your local council website, so your county council or your unitary authority if it's more broken down in your area, or your local authority in your London borough if you're in London. So that may be a number that you need to go off and find out. That might be part of your next steps to cover there. But others who can help. Now, probably there's not going to be one person that's going to be the whole solution to all of this, but it may just be useful to put your neighbour's phone number there, other family relatives, even if they're not nearby, they may be able to kind of arrange follow-up care or some sort of support in a more long-term situation. Yeah, anybody else that you think is going to be kind of helpful in this situation. If you had a care agency you work with, you might want to pop their details there as well, so somebody may be able to arrange additional hours or different hours of care if that's required as well. Okay, but I appreciate if it's blank at the moment, just leave that problem at the back door, okay? Leave it out there for now. Let's focus on just getting down what we do know, and then we'll focus on what we do about those other challenges. Nearly there. Medical. What's their medical condition or diagnosis? Any medications, treatments and timings. Top tip here, if you get an old-fashioned prescription slip still with your repeat prescription orders, that may already have the information you need, and you may just need to staple it on, photocopy it on, to take a picture of it. It may already be there, because that's likely to be the bit that changes quite a lot as well. Okay, so that's why it's sometimes quite good to have a separate on its own sheet, so you can just update it without having to update the whole of your plan. Or when it changes, you can get a good old white sticker or a piece of paper, write it on and stick it over the top to replace it, rather than having to rewrite things. Keep thinking as simple as possible with these things, and any allergies, okay? And then maybe one of these following sections, what feels most important that you'd want to get down? Is it about their daily routine? Is it about their personal care, emotional, mobility needs? Is it about their dietary requirements? Is that a key thing? Or is it more about the kind of the bigger picture in the household, or maybe a couple of those things? Just start to write down a few things. And if this was all the time you had to do to put an emergency plan together, how far could you get? Okay, now, again, I'm saying it's not perfect, but it's probably better than where we were 10 minutes ago. Okay. Lovely. Some of you will be thinking, oh, yes, I need to get this on my phone. I need to do some follow-up things. So there's maybe a little list of jobs that you need to follow up. You may be thinking, oh, I can do this as a Google Doc. Now, I would recommend do those sorts of things. If they work for you and they're not something complicated for you, then make use of the technology that you are comfortable with. Most of us are comfortable with pen and paper, but some of us are comfortable with Notes app in our phone because we can copy and paste that into a message to send someone really simply. And Google Doc, we can have a link and give other people access to it. There's all sorts of clever things we can do in that. Or it may just be a long WhatsApp message with all the information somebody may need on a WhatsApp message. Then it's on your phone because you sent it, and it's on their phone because you sent it to them. It could be something as simple as that. Now, in some of your areas where you have a local authority, that it does vary what's available, but some will have a plan, an emergency care plan package, where you register with the local authority, with the local council, social services, you tell them your plan and give them all of that information and more, and they will then arrange for care for 48 hours worth of care. And they may even issue with an emergency carers card, which you can put in your purse or wallet and things like that. So once you've got this basics, that might be a good thing to follow up and see what's available in your local area, but you're already made a start. Just having a basic plan is a really great step, mostly because of the reassurance it gives you. But I know that by going over this, we're flagging up all sorts of emotions. So we'll start to look at some of those things down a little bit more. Okay, so I'm going to whiz back through. So we've renamed it if we want to, put all the information that's important, not putting every single detail there, but things like their full name. So I call Matt Matt, but he's Matthew Bourne. So that information coupled with his date of birth and his NHS number is going to make it easy for professionals to find him in systems and things like that, and to make sure they're dealing with got details of the right person. Again, home address will help with someone knowing where to go. And it may be, I've just thought that one, our address is not an easy place to find. So it might need a little bit of how to find the address if you're sort of down a country lane without any house numbers and things like that. We're on a busy road, which so it's hard for people to spot the house. Telephone number so that they can start those calls. And I see that's kind of triggered thoughts that actually just having some phone numbers written down somewhere for people to have to hand is really helpful, rather than them just being on telephones, just having that little list. So fantastic. Lovely. Something that's really important to know, put that up front. Don't let that important information get lost in all the other categories that might be on various templates that are around. Some helpful contacts. Again, that sheet might be useful for you for other purposes as well. The medical details and any allergies and medicines, etc. Again, that can be really useful if they're going to hospital, go for a long appointment. And then whatever's relevant, daily routines, personal care, emotional needs, mobility needs, dietary requirements, anything about other hand pets, okay? So keeping it super simple. So once you start, you might think of lots of other things you can add. Once you've got the basics, you can keep going. It's one of those jobs that's never really finished. But even though it's not perfect, you can tick it off as I've kind of got it. I'm 90% of the way there. I've now got somewhere to add even more useful things. Let me stop sharing, and let's now, this is the key thing, as well as questions. I'm really interested to see all the tips that you're sharing, what's coming up for you while you were doing this. Now, persuading the person you care for that this is something we need to do. There's a challenge. How do we do that? Okay, so any thoughts on that? Do share some answers in the chat as well. Persuading someone that this is something we need to do. It might be helpful to dial it down to the handover. What if? And, you know, it can in itself be a useful practice. You might also want to make it a bit two-way, particularly like for those of you that have done the lasting power of attorney, quite often the solution for that is to be approaching it from a, oh, not you're someone that needs help and oh dear, you're such a problem, but from a, we all need this sort of thing in place, okay? So what would happen if I wasn't here? What would happen if you weren't here? What do you know that I wouldn't know, etc.? And how can we make that all easy? Sometimes that can be also be a way of reminding someone, if you do need to, you know, that you do have your own health needs and there may be times where you're not always available, and that's okay. Okay, so, and it's also a helpful check-in on independent, and it may actually encourage someone to say, no, I can do that for myself. Actually, I've slipped and I'm letting you do that for me, but with a reminder, I can do that for myself. So it might be that you're changing some of those things to remind them to have a drink rather than get them a drink. And to a certain extent, if they're not interested, you may just have to do what you can on your own. Now, the big challenge here is nobody's going to be as good as you when it comes to taking over care. And that's quite often one of the most challenging and upsetting things to realise. Quite often what then happens is, because we haven't got an emergency plan in place, we keep going back round that question and spending time thinking about it. And it may be that spending time thinking about it won't change that or move it forward. And actually, we just have to acknowledge and accept that. And actually, by having an emergency plan, we're not constantly having to revisit that. We just think, well, I don't know what's going to happen, but here's all the information I know, which is better than me having done no handover. And that overwhelming thought that in the future, this is going to be, what's going to happen when you're not here. None of us has found the secret to eternal life yet here on earth. So what's going to happen there? That's a real different one. And recognizing, yes, as Claire said there, that creates that freeze response in our admin. So we need to do something with that thought and with that emotion for a moment so we can progress on with the admin. And then sometimes having progressed on with the admin, we feel at least that, well, I've done what I can. And maybe, sometimes we'll come up with some creative solutions, but generally I found chatting about it till the cows come home doesn't change it. It doesn't bring up any creative solutions or changes. There's something different in terms of processing that emotionally that may need to happen. And culturally, maybe a very difficult thing to explain to others, maybe from different cultural backgrounds, about kind of why this might be necessary, and that someone else might come in and help instead of us. That might be quite upsetting for the person we care for as well. And the biggest question is that big one: who will take over, and will they be good enough? And that's maybe a question that we can't answer. There are answers to it, like social services, but I don't think that's an answer that's going to make us go, oh, right, okay, that's fine. Thanks for that answer. I didn't know that. I think you've all tried and looked at all those options, and it may be a problem that doesn't have a solution and just needs to be processed emotionally in some way. And I'm not saying that's going to take you to a magical better place, but going over and over it because it's an emergency planning session isn't helping people. And it may be that we need to do a bit of research about local care companies. Are there care companies that we would prefer to be contacted if we weren't there? Do we have some choice and some preference about it? So we kind of exploring those options as well. And let's do a simple one. Message in a bottle thing. The message in the bottle in the fridge. So there's a Lions Club, and you can sort of get it through other organisations. But if you Google message in a bottle, you'll find a page where you can put in your postcode and find how the scheme runs in your area. But it's basically a small plastic bottle that you get a small piece of paper to write a few details down, and you pop it in there and you pop it in the fridge. So the emergency services are used to that being a thing. So you might not be able to get your whole emergency plan in there, but you might be able to put the most important things and where to find the emergency plan, which may also be stuck on the fridge, because if that's where they're going to find the emergency, the bottle, it may be there. Other people will put up something on the back door of things as well. It's surprising. I was trying to chat with my friend Rich, who's a paramedic, because I know we've had this conversation before, but I was trying to get him to think about it a bit more. And he's like, oh, we'll look in the fridge, we'll look for the medicine drawer. There's normally something useful in there. We'll check in people's handbags. They'll look in all the obvious places. And he said, yes, we used to check telephone tables, that they don't exist anymore, but sometimes you can see where the charging happens, and that might be where the documents are there as well. Okay. And some people may have more complex things like wristbands with a link or a QR code or something to go somewhere, or a phone number to ring. And not everybody needs all of those solutions. And sometimes thinking about all those things stops us getting the basic plan in place. But that's the next step. Once you've got a plan, who needs to know about this and how would they find it? That's a big question with keys. Should there be a key safe? That's not going to be the right solution for everybody, but it might be absolutely perfect for some. And there might be a small group of people that you keep up to date with the key safe number and change it periodically. Some people don't like the idea of a key safe because it shows there's a vulnerable person living in that house. So think about where you hide it or have it. But for some people, it's absolutely a very practical solution that works. So once you've got your basic plan, what else might help are really helpful things to think about. So There's kind of life stories that you can put together information about them with pictures and help them sort of talk through it. There are also things like hospital passports if they go into hospital. Okay, so some of your information from your emergency plan will go straight onto that, and it's almost the same thing, but there'll be slightly different things if they're in hospital and things that they need. Others will have an all about me form and things like that as well that sum up a patient. So if you've already got that, that might go alongside your emergency plan. So just starting to build these resources up is really helpful. Okay.
I was going to add, hospitals now, they do your latest report, they give a little breakdown of a history or summarize, and that could be helpful just to add in case there's something you've missed or medical terminology you didn't know, that might be helpful.
That's good. That's brilliant. And I think sometimes looking at what you've already got like that and just keeping it with it would be helpful, but just making sure you've got the main things summarized so people aren't wading through loads of paperwork, finding out what they like on their toast, only to discover later on that they're allergic to penicillin. It's that sort of making sure the priority things are up front, but a little bit of medical background is going to be super helpful as well. It's another good one. Yeah, symptoms to look out for. So for some people, if they had a fever, then it's give them paracetamol and send them to bed. For other people, that would mean they're at risk of a fit or something like that. And so more important steps would need to be taken. Just the general background, making sure everyone's up to date with their jabs and everyone's communicated with as much as possible can be really helpful and take the pressure out in the point of an emergency. Do check with your local authority about emergency card schemes, see what they've got, see how helpful are they? Are they going to include replacement care, or are they just a different template for you to fill in? And some local authorities or carer support organisations will have someone that will sit and go through this with you. What else have we got here? Yeah. Timing of drugs, absolutely. That's a real key one with Parkinson's and around sort of timing with drugs and food and stuff like that. But yeah, the person you care for being reluctant to have help. That can be a real challenge as well, can't it? And I see you may have found carers cards online where you have to pay. Do think very carefully about whether that is right for you. Quite often they're based around discount schemes. But if you just want something that tells other people that you're a carer and this is the number to phone, a local scheme or a self-made card or updating your in case of emergency contacts on your phone may well do the job as well. And yeah, bigger thing, any DNRs or care plans, etc., that have been agreed of the person you care for, if that's relevant to them as well. So that, it might need to be there, but it might, don't worry about that being the first thing that needs to be there. We're thinking about you're not there and someone's stepping in to care for them in the first 48 hours, etc. How quickly can social services step in? That will be as quickly as required. If your person is able to sort of support themselves for a few hours and social services is aware of that, then that takes some of the pressure off. But there'd be a duty social worker whose responsibility it will be to leap into action. And obviously, if things are kind of really, depending on what the situation is, if you're in hospital, for example, that'll be sort of backed up and supported by NHS emergency services or police and things like that. We had a situation recently with a family member, and in the end, it was the police that got there first because there wasn't much of a plan with social services and somebody got to the house quickly. So depending on, thinking about how long can they cope, what's the need, how quickly can they get there? It may well be if you have that situation where someone's going to need to be there within an hour, that's really important. You may want to register your plan with social services to make sure they're aware of the complexity of your caring situation. So even if they don't have an emergency planning scheme, I would still recommend to contact your adult social care or children's services to let them know about your situation, particularly if you're thinking, I've got no relatives close by, there are no neighbours that could step in, it would be completely dependent on social services and it's urgent, then probably best to have a conversation with them about how that would work in your area and to make sure they're registered and they're aware of you. And the final one there, is everyone aware of the summary care record? You should be able to accept or decline this. It enables any medical agency, doctor, hospital to see your medical history. So fantastic. So check where you're at or where the person you care for is at with their summary care record. But what they're planning on adding to that is that everyone has one and it has your carer's emergency plan attached to it. Wouldn't that be joined up thinking? So that's hopefully where that summary care record is moving forward in the future as well. So it's kind of got details of the carer and details of the emergency plan should that carer not be available. So that would be awesome when that starts to happen. And the question about who has access to the health LPAs, the public guardian has the record of any health LPAs that are registered with the Public Guardian, the Office of the Public Guardian, so Central Government Register of LPAs. If the person you care for no longer has capacity and you have a health and welfare lasting power of attorney for them, then you can evoke that by letting the people you work with and organisations know that you have that, and they'll ask for copies, etc., or a code, depending on how they work. So lots of stuff there.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, it just came to my mind in terms of people who live quite remote, and it's quite difficult to get someone, if you need someone there urgently to get there and check on you're cared for. The police also do welfare checks. It's even worth asking for the police to go and do a welfare check.
Yeah.
And they'll probably send someone to stay with them until help can arrive. So that's another thing for those who are thinking, oh no, we live quite remote, it will be hard to get someone there in time. No, you can actually call the police and have them. And
Yeah.
so that's another one worth noting
That's
as
it.
well.
Yeah. And I know it's hard, isn't it? Because we're quite used to dealing with services and feeling that things don't get followed up. But generally, emergency services, particularly where police and paramedics are involved, there's often a much swifter response than we would expect or that we would know about. There's lots of kind of things like paramedics that aren't an ambulance, but first responders that will get somewhere and things like that. So there are options, okay? But just because we don't understand all the options doesn't mean we don't have an emergency plan. First, get the plan down, okay? So I wonder how far you've got and how it's going. I don't imagine anybody is completely right. That's done then. I'll just put that in a cupboard and we're sorted. You may need to be thinking about where that plan is going to go. You may need to be having conversations with somebody about it. So it may be social services. It may be the person you care for. It may be others that may be involved as part of that emergency plan, neighbours, friends, family, even if they're that little bit further away, just that they know what the plan is can be really helpful. It's amazing what people can advocate on your behalf from a distance as well. So, setting up a little WhatsApp group with your basic information in, for example, can be a really great starting point, even if you've got people further away. And then you can start to build from that rather than sending them the whole of your emergency plan and all the different scenarios that might happen. Just a few details might be a really helpful starting point. So what's your next step? What you're going to do? And you might want to make the note of this for yourself. Do you need to allocate some time to get started? Because maybe you just came along to listen today and the chat was really busy and maybe it wasn't possible to put those emotions out the back door. Maybe you need to allocate some time to keep going and finish it off because you did make a start. If you've got a piece of paper that says backup plan or handover plan and the person's first name, you've made a start. Well done. Maybe you're going to watch the recording through again to go through it. Maybe you need to have a conversation with someone. Maybe you've got a plan, you just need to update it, and you're going to do it really easily just by sticking a piece of paper over the bit that's out of date and not making it a big job. Maybe you need to reward yourself for the progress you've made today, because if you've been stuck with this for a long time, we see a lot of people download our templates. We try and make it simpler and simpler, but we appreciate that the complexities going on can mean we get quite stuck with it. So if you've made some progress, well done. So really good to see where people are up to on this and kind of what's their next step. Because it's all very well, you've committed an hour of your time to come and listen to me waffle away, but what happens next is super, super important. There may be a conversation to have with somebody just to get the conversation started. Maybe it's not going to solve everything, but just sometimes just keeping moving forward with that next step. Hopefully getting to yourself to a place where you feel confident enough to just leave it alone and not have to keep going back around that difficult emotional scenario. Thank you for being with me and look forward to seeing you again soon on the next Mobilise Live. Take care.